In this week's Torah reading of Tissa, we have a very epic saga. On the one hand, tragic, and at the same time, as we will see, one which carries hope for everybody. And it is none other than the episode of the making and the worshipping of the golden calf, which, as I mentioned last week, is really part of this most serious sin of idolatry, which is serving as a divine entity anything other than the true one God, who is the creator and the almighty ruler of the universe. And indeed, many pages have been written and much ink has been spilled asking how this could have happened in such close proximity to this great revelation of godliness to the nation at the giving of the Torah. One concept which is evoked is that the higher the level of spirituality which we attain, the more the forces of opposition and concealment strengthen themselves to try to tempt us away from the pure belief that we reach. It should also be noted, as the Talmud explains, that this was not truly a conviction that the calf would replace God, for the most part. Although in a small group of people there was that very attempt. We know that the idea to make the calf began when it was thought that Moshe was not returning from the mountain. He said he will be there for 40 days. He left in the daytime. That day that he ascended the mountain was not meant to be part of the number of 40, because a complete day in Jewish tradition begins with the night before. And so they should have began counting the 40 days the next night. And so what some interpreted as his delayed return meant that he would not come, and hence the idea became of making the calf. So you see from this sequence of events that the calf was more meant as a replacement for Moshe. Moshe was in fact kind of an intermediary. We don't have in Judaism intermediaries in the same sense that other religions do, because the non-Jewish concept of the intermediary is we connect ourselves to the intermediary who is himself connected to God, and it is our connection to the intermediary that makes us connected to God. But the Jewish idea is at variance with that. The Jewish idea is the intermediary is there to connect us, to help us through his teachings and inspiration, to help us connect directly to God. This in Hebrew is referred to as the Mimutze HaMechaber. The other kind of intermediary is called the Mimutza, which means the intermediary, HaMafsik, which is an interruption or a barrier between the lower people and the Creator, a barrier which is perceived as being necessary because the lower beings are thought not to be able to connect directly to God. The Jewish concept of the tzaddik, for example, the righteous person, the teacher, is the Mimutze HaMechaber, the intermediary which connects us directly to God, helps us connect directly to God. So in that sense, we see that the golden calf was not truly an act of idolatry in that sense, but rather an idea of finding a new intermediary in the place of the non-present Moshe. And yet later, in the recounting of the creation of the calf, it is said that those who made it said, Ela Elokecha Yisrael, this is your God, Israel. So it would seem that it was a kind of idolatry, and the answer is that it was in the minds of a small group of people called the Eruv Rav, which means the multitude that was mixed in. Those were non-Jewish Egyptians that cling to the Jewish people, in a sense converted, but their motives were not pure. They wanted to be emancipated from Egypt as well. They did not truly internalize the teachings of the Torah and of the one God. And the proof of this is the expression Eila Elokecha Yisrael. Here is your God. It doesn't say our God. So from this, the commentaries understand that this was the initiative of a small group. Others, of course, joined in, but as we say, it is explained in the Talmud that their idea was more of a intermediary, such as was Moshe. Why a calf? Because it says that on the revelations of God on the Red Sea, it says even the Shifcha, which means a simple maid, saw more than what the prophet Ezekiel saw. Now what the prophet Ezekiel saw in his prophecy was the four faces of the chariot, a very deeply profound and mystical vision. And one of them was called the Pnei Hashor, the face of the ox. So it was the face of the ox, the face of the lion, the face of man, and the face of the eagle. So it is explained in the mystical works that their creation of a calf was as a kind of recollection of what they envisioned in the spiritual experience that they went through when they were at the Red Sea. So on this level, it should not be taken as a mere simple, straightforward case of, oh, this is God. On the other hand, in the context of the spiritual level they were in, following the giving of the Torah, and hence, based on what was expected of them, morally it was considered of this gravity. And hence, it was a very grave sin, one which in fact brought the impurity of sin and death back to the world. In the Kabbalah, it's explained that originally Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were meant to live forever. And this means that just as death signifies the separation of the soul and body, because when the soul is in the body, it enlivens the body, and the body continues to live. This is only true if the two are compatible. But if the body sins, it becomes uninhabitable by the soul. The soul then leaves at some point eventually, and that is the idea of death. And so we see how sin is connected to death, because it is the phenomenon which makes the connection of the body and soul temporary rather than permanent. And it is said that this very interruption was removed by the giving of the Torah. So, in terms of the revelation at Mount Sinai, once again, sin and death were removed from the world. As the Talmud says, that the writing of the commandments was charut ala luchot, engraved on the tablets of the law, but it says do not read charut, rather cherut, that it was freedom. And one of the explanations of freedom is that the giving of the Torah affected freedom from death again. And yet, with the creation of the golden calf and the worshipping of the golden calf, once again, sin was introduced to the world, much as it was at the beginning of creation when Adam and Eve sinned for the first time.